right, how's everybody doing? Yeah! Come on, yeah, get excited. All right, so today I want to talk to you guys about boxing. So I'm Dubfar on the Twitters and GitHub. I work on the operations team, as you can tell from the lovely neckbeard. I also work on this thing we've kind of started developing at GitHub called the Friction team. And it's kind of an unofficial team, a little amalgamous right now, but it's about the idea that we've got a few people who dedicate a lot of their time to making it easier to develop things and design things at GitHub. And that's kind of where boxing came from. So you might ask, what is a boxing, right? Well, it kind of looks like that, but that doesn't tell you too much. So it all started with myself and this other guy named John Barnett. Now, John Barnett is a fantastic developer. He's released all sorts of cool projects. But basically, one day we got really mad that working on projects, whether at GitHub or any other company, was crap. It was awful. You spent days setting your environment up. God forbid you had to wipe your machine and start again. It was a bad experience. So we developed Boxin, which is a framework and a standard library. It's kind of a philosophy about how you should do things. It tries to install dependencies for you, manage your system configuration, and generally stay out of your way while making it easy to get things done. So why should you use Boxin? Well, the first thing is, as a GitHubber, we want you to be able to ship code on your first day. It might sound a little adventurous, but that's kind of what we aim for. So let's pretend it's your first day at Company X, and you want to ship something, right? So you say, oh man, I'm going to get a new laptop. Spend 3 days setting it up. I'll fight with RVM or Nginx or Apache or what have you. And maybe by the end of the week, I'll have written a line of code. Well, that's lame. So we said, let's throw that out. Let's make it this easy. You're going to open a website. It's going to give you a command. You're going to run it. And then you're going to be able to write code. One of the other things you get with Boxin is constant updates. So basically, if you've ever used systems, for example, Cinderella or Pivotal Workstation, they make a large emphasis on you have a blank machine, and now you can get at a usable development environment. And if it breaks, you better just wipe your laptop and do it again. Well, we think that's lame too. We don't like that approach. Boxin is designed to be run once a day, once a week, what have you. We encourage GitHubbers to run it all the time because there's constantly updates that we're shoving down for anything. So you want to know, like GitHub, recently we've started testing Ruby 1.9.3 in development because GitHub's still on 1.8.7, so it's a large site, lots to move over. And all I did to roll it out was I pushed an update to Boxin that said, GitHub now uses our custom fork of 1.9.3. Told them, hey, there's a pull request, show you how it changed, why it changed, this is how it's going to be. All you have to do is run Boxin, and then you just run script server and GitHub, and everything's going to work. Took care of everything for them. No thought behind it. And the reason we do this sort of thing is if you make it hard to update, people aren't going to do it. They don't want to do things that are hard. They want to do things that are easy, intuitive, understandable. And when people don't update, then you get this weird problem of drift, right, between development and production, where maybe you have some people developing on a certain patch release of 1.8.7, some people developing on Ruby Enterprise Edition, some people on 1.9.2, some people on 1.9.3, maybe somebody running like 2.0 RC or some crap like that, and like it's a mess, right? Because when you lack consistency in development and production, you start to develop problems. Really weird latent problems, like the magic Ruby 1.9.3 patch release that suddenly broke a bunch of random C extensions that happened to be used by Active Record. It's a bad time. So one of the other things you get with these constant updates is the benefits of security. So let's take a real world situation. Let's say that Java now is terrible on Safari as a web plugin, which it actually is. You guys should totally disable it in Safari. Chrome disables it by default. So you send people an email and you say, oh my God, guys, you should just go ahead, get rid of this. You're going to have all sorts of security problems. Let's just avoid these problems. And maybe like, let's say 10% of people will read it and actually do it. Half the people are just going to archive it. I don't want to read this. I got time to work on code, not to read this crap. So that's lame. So what we can do now is we can roll out security updates just through simple, it's source code, man. So Atmos opens up a pull request with a couple lines changed and says, hey, we're going to disable this because we know it's busted. It's a security risk. We can roll it out to people that way. And we just say, hey, guys, we did this. Here's the pull request. You can see all the reasoning behind it. Sorry, if you have to enable it, do it on a case-by-case basis. It also gives you repeatability of process, right? So how many times have people seen something like this? When you're onboarding a new employee, and maybe you're getting RVM installed for them, and it's not working just quite like you thought it used to. and then you struggle with it, and you're trying to debug, why can't they get this specific version of Ruby installed, and you're like downloading old DMGs with like GCC 4.3 to get Ruby to compile. Well, that's a mess too. We think that's kind of lame, so we want to avoid doing that. And the reason being is that manual processes are error prone. The reason that is because we're people, we're error prone, we're humans, we make mistakes. And the funny thing is, with computers, you can only make them as error prone as you want to. They're pretty good at following directions as long as you don't mess up the directions. One of the other things that's pretty cool about Boxen recently is the community. So we open sourced Boxen on Friday, Pacific, which is actually 5 days in the past because you guys are like in the future, which is pretty cool. And since then, and these are numbers from yesterday, so these are out of date actually. Look at that, 134 pull requests, or 124 pull requests when I learned to do math. Almost, what, 230-ish change issues, which shows the community is interested in Boxen. Like, we've seen a remarkable number of people like actively contributing, making it something that's more usable for their environments. And that's awesome. That's why we open source. We want people to benefit from the same sort of lessons that we learned and we're able to codify solutions to. And also GitHub is interested in doing it. I mean, John and myself are going to stay full-time maintainers on Boxen indefinitely until we hire other people at GitHub that also want to work on it. So it's not abandonware. Another thing to emphasize is that we actually use the same modules as you do. All the open source modules, we don't have any forks of Puppet modules. We don't have like our own Ruby module that we use and you guys get some stuff occasionally like 6 months down the line. We don't play that way. We're committed to like using this as a real open source sort of framework. It's a lot more similar to how we use Hubot, for example, where we have the Hubot scripts project, and we're using the same Hubot scripts that you guys are. And Boxen, which is a template repository to show you how to set up a Boxen, is actually synced periodically from GitHub's own Boxen. So you know it's actually kept very closely in sync. I do this about once a week manually. Very committed to making sure that you guys are doing Boxen the way that we found works best. It also provides a really extensive standard library. So Puppet has this funny thing called the Puppet Forge. How many people have used the Puppet Forge like ever? Okay, a few hands. You guys are veterans. You guys know what this is about. So it's kind of like rubygems.org, except for it's the worst possible version of rubygems.org. So imagine like you've got 10 things that all try to do bundler's functionality slightly differently. They all install the bundle command. Oh, and then other libraries depend on different implementations used for this like pseudo bundler wannabe thing. That is the state of the Puppet Forge. Like there's about a bajillion Nginx or Apache modules. None of them work the same way, and certain other libraries depend on certain versions of those, and like you can't mix and match certain libraries that have cross dependencies across those. It's a mess. So we think that's pretty lame. It's like actually super lame. And so one of the things that's really cool about Boxen is that we've really emphasized sort of this notion that actually Tim Sharp, sitting over there, another GitHubber, brought up on a blog post a couple of years ago, which is that people don't write Puppet modules designed to be libraries. They don't use the notion of the public contract to design to say, hey, for example, maybe we don't care exactly what you call your packaged version of Git, what the name of that package is. What we care is that by the time you're done with a Git class, you have some representation of a usable Git on your system. And that's how we've designed about the 90 or so Puppet modules that Boxen shipped with on day one. So they're very much plug and play. And they're designed to be that way. And as long as other people write their Puppet modules in a way that makes them reusable, you can pull in other modules from outside Boxen as well, and they should work just fine. So you can roll your own, but we've made it easy for you to use ours, so use ours. And I just want to make an aside here. This isn't like specifically a Puppet problem. Chef is much the same way. Most of the third-party modules not provided by Opscode directly are basically awful. They're nigh unusable, especially across each other. So really, this is something the configuration management community can learn a lot from Ruby developers, because RubyGems has mostly moved past most of these particular problems, especially with the advent of things like bundler and doing sane dependency management via semantic versioning. So you might ask, how does Boxen work? What's the nitty-gritty? So under the hood, I mean, there's a lightweight Ruby wrapper, but most of it is Puppet. So many of you probably haven't used Puppet. I imagine much more of you use Chef. Puppet is a very similar tool. So Puppet is a configuration management tool. And basically, what you say with Puppet is you write code that says, I want the state of my system to look like this. And that's exactly how Boxen works. And then when you run Puppet, it says, I'm going to make your system look like this as best I can. Every single time, and there's a magical mathematical word for this idempotency. Basically, it's the notion that no matter how many times you apply something over and over and over, you get the same resultant state. So that's kind of the key to how Puppet works the way it does. You could implement a lot of the functionality we do with Boxen in something like shell scripts or Ruby scripts or what have you. But the key thing is that keeping those scripts idempotent by nature is actually extremely difficult, especially as you move across versions, configuration changes, and stuff like that. With Puppet, you're able to better ensure that people upgrading from any previous state can get to the same desired end state without having to just scrap their machine and start from scratch, right? So how does Puppet work from a code perspective? So the first thing, the building blocks of Puppet are resources. Right? So resources look like this. Here are a few different types of resources. We can have a Git package, a MySQL service, a WFR user, or we can just like trash the machine. Now these resources all have types. So these are sort of resource types. These are high-level constructs that say, like for example, we want some way of running an arbitrary command on a system, or we want some way of installing a package, no matter what type of system it is. Now these types have providers. And providers are just a way to have pluggable backends that are usable by different types. So for example, you might have apt-get or yum for packages. You might have shell and POSIX, I believe, are two for the exec type services. You have like upstart, init, things like that. And the way that looks is kind of like this. So we're saying, for example, on a Debian-based system, we might say we want Git version 1.8.1, and we want to ensure that it is using the apt-get provider rather than maybe the aptitude provider, because they have different certain behaviors. And you can actually tell Puppet to provide defaults for all of your packages, like on a given system. That's really easy. You could see sort of a similar thing here with exec. We're saying to actually spawn a subshell and run it rather than execing it directly. So another key thing in Puppet, of course, being a language, is variables. Variables look like this. Should be very similar if you've written like really awful Ruby or Perl and just throw global variables everywhere. Puppet's got basically one giant namespace for variables, all things considered. There is some notion of scoping, but it's all kind of one namespace you can do whatever the hell you want with. So some of you might say, all right, well, let me try this. Maybe I want to grab a value about the system. I want to know what the host name is. You might try to pull up your Ruby chops and do something like this. Fortunately, that doesn't work. Instead, Puppet has this system called facts. And you can get them from various sources, but the most common one is a tool called Factor, which is very similar to All Hi and Chef. Basically, Puppet automatically will go ahead and collect various known things about your system for you that are all available at runtime, so you don't have to exec out and get these sorts of values. So you can see here some things that are provided on my local system, host name, OS 10 build version, L3 cache on my CPU in case that I need to know that it's exactly 3 megabytes at some point. And they're really easy to write. It's just Ruby code. You can see here we have a little helper method that checks if the root volume on an OS 10 system is full disk encrypted. And then we do a set code, which just actually sets the value of the factor fact. You can also have classes, just like Ruby. They're really simple. They look like this. So we have a Git class here, and we just put other resources inside of it, collect them up together. You can also go ahead and break things across variables. They have case statements and conditional assignment and stuff like that. You can do inclusion of other classes, which doesn't work the same way as include does in Ruby. Basically, what this does is it throws these classes into something called the catalog, makes sure that they are in the catalog so you can access their variables, that sort of thing. It requires a special case of include that, in addition to including the class, also creates a requirement between the current class and the target class, which we'll get to here in a minute. So these are the relationships that we talk about. So for example, some of you, if you're getting started with Puppet, might try to write something like that. Right? You might read that as saying, OK, I'm going to install a package, I'm going to create a file, we're going to start the service. Because that's what Chef teaches you to do. That's what shell scripts teach you to do. Turns out that's wrong. You can't actually do that in Puppet. And there's a good reason why. So this is what it should actually look like. Notify basically says, I'm not only going to happen before you, but if I change, I'm going to tell you to refresh yourself. Require is, of course, just a requirement. And basically, the actual execution order in this case will be as it reads top down. But the ordering that these are specified actually matters nothing at all. And these are due to metaparameters, which in Puppet you have notify and before. So the notify is exactly the same as before in terms of declaring a relationship, but triggers the refresh. Subscribe is the complement to notify. So you're saying, I'm going to watch you for changes, and I'm always going to happen after you. Now, the reason this all works is because Puppet is declarative. It's not a procedural language, so you can't treat it like a procedural language. And the reason it ends up being declarative is it actually builds. It compiles this thing called a catalog, and then it ends up turning that into a directed acyclic graph. And it traverses that graph to apply things in a certain consistent order every time. Now, it used to not be a consistent ordering always. If you add nodes on the same level, for example, they might be different previously. But as of Puppet 2.7, they have actually consistent ordering of catalogs. So for any given machine, the catalog, anytime you run it, will actually apply things in the exact same order. Now, you have modules just like Ruby. They're a grouping of classes. They have a certain layout. Kind of looks like this. You can see how you can specify in a module your factor facts, your Puppet parser plugins, your providers, your types. Your manifests are where you define your actual Puppet classes that you can use. And you can have static files and templates, just kind of like Chef and a few other things. And then you have a Puppet file, bundler for Puppet, modules, blah, blah, blah. There's all the technical stuff. Boom, out of the way. Let's get to the fun stuff. So how do you get a boxin? So you go to this repo here, our boxin. This is the template repository. And there's some instructions there. You follow those instructions, and you build your company, your organization, your team, a boxin that they can use. You bootstrap it. Then you go to this project called Boxin Web, and it gives you a few lines you can copy and paste, and you deploy this thing to Heroku, and you get a website like this. This is the same thing we use at GitHub to onboard employees. People visit a page, they copy and paste this, they run it, they get Boxin, they get all the things they need to develop in about 30 minutes. We have a full stack CI that runs this on every commit, and it takes, I think, 40 minutes to, including cloning every project on GitHub. And we've got about 500 private repositories that it has to clone down and set up. So it's a lot of stuff it's doing, and that only takes about 42 minutes. It's nice and easy. So how do you use a Boxin once you have it, right? The biggest way is through the command line tool. So you can run Boxin. That will go ahead and do all the necessary pre-flight and post-flight checks. Then it will actually run the Puppet code to make sure your system's up to state. You can print out a list of projects that Boxin knows about, and you can install projects easily from the command line. Now, how does it know which projects you've got set up? That's where these project manifests come in. Now, I'm really happy with the state of these. We actually abstracted this pretty recently into a really nice form that I think you guys are going to like. So say you want to hack on Boxin Web. You guys want to improve it. Maybe there's some bug that I've included in there, something like that. You can write something like this. Now, this is just good old Puppet code. We've made a custom type there called Boxin project. We're saying we need Nginx, we need Postgres, we know which repo we're going to clone it from on GitHub, and we need Ruby 193. And we're going to run it like this once we have all that code written out. What that's going to do is it's going to clone the repo, ensure Nginx is installed and the right version. It's going to set up an Nginx vhost. It's going to restart Nginx so it knows that the vhost is there. It's going to set the .ruby version file in the cloned repository. It's going to make sure that the Ruby version required by that .ruby version file is installed into your RBN setup. It's not only going to install Postgres, start Postgres the service, it's going to create databases for you, Boxin Web Development and Boxin Web Test, and it's going to create a .env file, which is a gem that we use to load environment facts out of Boxin. And that takes about 3 seconds, give or take, depending on how long it takes to download some packages. The other cool thing about this is you're not spending time compiling all those because we've gone ahead and patched Homebrew, and we've gone ahead and patched RBNV to support downloading static binaries that we've already pre-compiled for you for all that stuff, which is pretty cool. Once that's done, you can hop in the directory, you're on script server, you open up boxinweb.dev, done. You've got a development environment, you can start hacking on it. What if you want a little bit of personalization though, right? Maybe not everything is suitable for the entire company to have. Well, that's cool. We support this notion of a project manifest, or sorry, personal manifest. So say you want to install something for you. Maybe it's Minecraft, or maybe it's ZSH. You just create a file that is modules, people manifest, your GitHub username.pp, put whatever Puppet code you want in there. It's only going to happen on your machine, right? So if we look at GitHub's Boxin, I can't really bring up the repo for you right now because no network. But we've got somewhere around the neighborhood of 60-ish personal manifests right now across developers, designers. I think even our HR lady has a personal manifest now. So it's really simple. Like anyone can do it. Just takes a little bit of reading on Puppet stuff. What other stuff can you do? Well, I have 2 machines. I've got Scruffy here, which is my MacBook Air. I've got Bender, which is my Retina machine that's set up at a desk. On Bender, I go crazy. I install every project that GitHub has so I can make sure that I'm testing everything before I roll out changes. Little subset on Scruffy. My entire Git config file is automated this way. I never have to do that silly user.name and user.email stuff again. I set my key repeat in OS 10, and I stopped the stupid pop-over. You know, like the accent one when you like hold like a vowel character? Yeah, that doesn't pop up anymore. So that's pretty cool. We also have issue integration, which we're really happy with. This is Y. Mendel, actually. GitHub implemented this. So pretend I run Boxen, right? I get an error. Oh my God, something's broken. This will automatically create an issue for me on GitHub on our private fork of Boxen. And it'll look like this. And it shows you all sorts of cool information. Shows you who ran it and failed, when they ran it, the machine they ran it on by host name, the OS and version that they were running, the shell that they were running, the SHA that they were running, the compare view to master, the changes in their local tree, the Puppet command it ran exactly, and a full log output of the command they ran, which is super useful for debugging. So basically, the notion is that any GitHubber, right, they run this. If it breaks, they don't worry about the fact that it breaks. Myself and John Barnett, we automatically know, because we get these issue notifications. We hop into the issue. We identify the problem. We roll out a patch release, and we say, hey, run Boxen again. Your problem is solved. It's that easy. They don't have to worry about reporting bugs or anything like that. We do it for them. So say I fixed the error, and I've told them to run Boxen again. Well, it also automatically closes issues whenever you have a successful run. All the failure tag issues automatically close. And we do this all through the GitHub Issues API. This is all available on the public fork as well. There's nothing like secret sauce about this. You set a couple of environment variables in your config boxen.rb, just the repo name and issues enabled yes. And it automatically works. And the way it works is that we generate, for access to cloning private GitHub repos over HTTPS, we create an OAuth token that has access to your repos, of course, because there's no other way we can clone them because we have to do credential helping. Otherwise, you'll get prompted for username and password every time. And it uses that user's token to post an issue as them across the API. Real easy. So I mentioned that we have auto update built into Boxen. Now that doesn't mean that Boxen is going to auto update your dependencies. They're not going to change from under you. Of course, this Puppet file is very similar to how Bundler works, so your versions are still locked. What it means is that if your individual Boxen fork itself has updates on run, Boxen will try to update you if it's sane to do so. So if you have a perfectly clean working directory and you run Boxen, it'll update you and run. You'll get all the newest stuff. But say you don't. Say you've got a dirty tree. Boxen's not going to auto-update you. Not only that, it's going to tell you it's not going to auto-update you because you've got a dirty tree. What if maybe you have unpushed commits? Yeah, we're not going to overwrite those either. We'll tell you. And same thing if you're working on a non-master branch, right? So we're not going to clobber your work ever. We make it easy to develop on like feature branches or test out commits before pushing them up. But we make it apparent that, hey, you need to reconcile this at some point. Otherwise, updates aren't going to work anymore. So let's say maybe at this point you're sold. Well, that's pretty cool. Let's get started. So make a Boxen for your company, for your community, your organization. For anything that uses computers, you should try to automate it, right? We're developers. We write code to do these things. So I've started here. We offer, of course, GitHub training, both free and paid for. And I've actually started work on a Boxen to automate setup of machines for people who do our GitHub training classes. Because it's silly, like we have to send them like a week in advance directions. It's like, here's how you can install Git at Hub and you can set up your Git config. Forget that. I'd rather just tell people you can copy and paste this and you're ready to do our class. If you have problems, you can file issues on GitHub. We also have an IRC room. We tend to idle in there. So again, I'm Dub Farr. If you guys want to work on things like Boxen, work on friction problems in an organization, definitely come talk to me at some point. We'd love to have you come in and interview at GitHub about these sort of positions. Thank you very much for having me. The slides are available on Speaker Deck. Now, are there any questions? Yes, there's actually it hasn't been pushed yet, but there's an open pull request. They've added support for GitHub Enterprise to the OmniAuth GitHub gem, which was required for this stuff, and we're about to roll out an update to the Boxen template that supports using your enterprise installation as the source for repositories. And operating systems at OS 6 seem to be all the examples for that. Right now it's OS 10 only. Now there's nothing that makes it have to be OS 10 only. That's just, so to put it in perspective, we have exactly one developer at GitHub who runs a non-OS 10 machine, including the entire Windows development team. Most of them virtualize Windows inside of OS 10. Yeah, crazy, right? Now, that said, Puppet actually, due to the provider system, supports any number of distributions, operating systems. Puppet runs on Windows. It runs on basically every Linux I know of. It runs on BSD. It's only a matter of, we want to focus on OS 10 so we could get this out soon, get this in the hands of people. We're more than happy to work with people on getting patches submitted and cleaned up to add support for other distributions. We would love to see Linux have it work on like Ubuntu, Debian, Red Hat, Fedora, stuff like that within the next 6 months or so. Any other questions? Oh, this is a fun one. So why Puppet, not Chef? So we're a big Puppet shop at GitHub. I got to be honest there. One of the things we like most about Puppet is the enforcement of declaring relationships and dependencies through the DAG. Now you can write you can write Chef in a way that it does this kind of, but it ends up being really hairy. Like I can count on probably, I'd have to use all of your fingers in this room to count the number of times in Chef I've had to do service whatever, do action nothing, set up some config files, service do this running, so you can have the config files notify the service of changes. That sort of stuff ends up being messy. So based upon reasons like that, we ended up going with Puppet. You could totally implement this in Chef. You could. There's nothing preventing you from doing it. I would hazard to say, though, we've worked on this for about a year. We've got a massive code base out there. You're obviously, of course, welcome to fork it and work on it in Chef, but I would encourage you to give it a shot before doing so. Yeah.
Did you have any resistance against it from developers who wanted to keep total control of their machines?
Oh man. So yeah, this is kind of an interesting one. So I developed, talking to a couple of GitHubbers. We do have a few people who do not wish to move onto it, and that's totally their prerogative. I like to call it the artisanal development machine. Now, I don't believe that machines should be done this way. Like I mentioned before, it's very much manual. It's error prone. We're not going to prevent people from working on projects if they don't have Boxen. What we can say is that we've tried very hard to make it easier to use Boxen than not to. And we've tried not to get in people's way such that it makes them unable or unwilling to use Boxen. And of course, this is something that you have to figure out in your organization, your team, something you guys have to talk about. But it's very easy to integrate. We run, for example, everything on non-default ports. So if you have existing like MySQL service or Postgres service, we're not going to conflict with that. We provide environment variables for everything, so it makes it really easy to integrate. We actually have a bunch of templates for like Rails configuration files that you can just copy and paste that work for people who aren't on Boxen using stuff on default ports. But if you have Boxen, we'll gracefully sort of upgrade to the Boxen paths just using regular old environment variables.
And if you wanted to, if someone left GitHub and they have all those personal customizations, do they have to uninstall Boxen?
No, actually, all they would have to do in that case is obviously we'd make them delete GitHub source code, but they would be able to keep the rest of it. Obviously, they wouldn't be able to clone our like GitHub organization and repositories anymore. But all they'd have to do is configure their Boxen you saw in the environment variable for the repo name to use. They just have to point that at another Boxen repo, and they'd be able to just move on from there. But yeah, we would, obviously make them delete GitHub source code. But they would be able to keep all their running services configured and stuff like that. And of course, you don't have to host repositories on GitHub to use Boxen. You can use any regular Git source.
You said that you have different port numbers for different versions of MySQL and stuff, right?
Yep.
Is that like a per project basis? Like, do you set up a new MySQL for a project?
No. We do have a notion of like this is the Boxen MySQL, and like the general standard is if it's in a port range. In the less than 1,000 range, we basically add 1,000 to it. If it's in the 1,000 to 9,999 range, we add 10,000 to it, so on and so forth. And we expose those through environment variables.
Because I heard that you would have different ports for different versions of MySQL, but how do you track which version is what? Like, do you guys have a convention? Or?
So we're very homogeneous in our environments between development and production. We've specifically engineered Boxen to run the exact same version of MySQL that we run everywhere in production, for example. Same thing with Redis, same thing with Elasticsearch. We keep them very, very closely aligned because one of the goals here was, of course, to make it brain dead to end up running a very, very similar technological stack to production, not have to worry about those sort of concerns. So the only time we had bumped something like a MySQL version is if we're prepping to upgrade, for example, MySQL on production. We would test that out in development first and then upgrade in production. But aside from that, no, we don't tend to run multiple versions of services just because it's harder from an operational perspective to support. When you run one version of MySQL everywhere, you have sort of a known expectation of what the performance patterns are of MySQL in that case, and there's a lot of change that can kind of, and drift that can occur if you're running like MySQL 5527 in one place and 5530 in another. So we try to avoid that as much as possible. Yeah?
Are there any prerequisites to installing Boxing, like you pull it back out of a box and then run the command will work?
Yeah, so there is one prerequisite. It's something that unfortunately we cannot legally automate, and that is Xcode and the Xcode command line tools. Now, recently, Xcode, they put out the command line tools originally as a publicly available download. They changed it recently, though. It's back behind the Apple ID sign-in, and according to the Apple Developer Program license, we can't distribute it. Now, that said, we've reached out to Apple, and we've kind of tossed some ideas their way and said it would really make it easy to integrate if we do it this way. Now, of course, Apple is not going to tell us if they're going to work on it, if so, when it's going to be done. We'll know the day you do if they ever ship it. But we would like to ideally see something to like how they handled Java, where they install a shim that provides USR bin Java, and if you try to run it, it will detect if Java is installed, and if not, it'll prompt you, say, do you want to install Java, and you can just click install. We'd like to see something similar for things like GCC on the system, and then that would remove the one and only dependency required to get Boxen running.
Could you actually point to a local copy of your Xcode and come down and an automated process to go accept the license?
Kind of. It's a little questionable, and honestly, like I brought it up with our lawyer at GitHub, and I was just really confused. To be perfectly honest, it's really unfortunate, but thankfully Xcode's a lot easier to install these days than it used to be. It's a lot smaller also. The binary you download off of the Mac App Store is about 3 gigs these days, and then the command line tools are another few hundred megs. I mean, it's a small inconvenience, but it is an inconvenience worth not getting sued over. Yes? So we've heard this a lot. So basically what it comes down to is that communication over TCP/IP is communication over TCP/IP. You know, that's not going to change across OS 10 when dealing with something like talking to Elasticsearch, for example, or talking to MySQL. That's still the same. We could run Linux, really, but all that's going to change is really the values of certain like syscontrol settings. We have a staging environment that we test those in properly beforehand. It does make development easier for a lot of people. We've also, heard questions like, well, maybe if you don't want to run everyone on Linux machines, maybe you have them run virtual environments. Now, the problem with virtualizing everything is while it does get you as close as humanly possible to your production environment without coding on a bare metal server in a rack, it's actually really painful for people to work on it. Getting designers to be able to iterate quickly on designs with a virtualized environment is extremely difficult. They have to learn how to deal with things like running a bunch of rake tasks every time they want to apply changes or running Capistrano tasks. And quite frankly, the goal of Boxen is, like I said, to make it easier to work on things than harder. And we found that this was the way that most people were willing to move over to Boxen because we made it too easy for them to use it rather than to stay doing their own hand-rolled systems.
So follow-up question then, have you found things that are very hard to script on OS X that would be, Linux is much more scriptable?
Yeah, there are a few things. One of the nastiest things with OS 10 is dealing with binaryplists. You can use plist to do it, but it ends up making the Puppet run really slow. In addition to that, we found some particularly questionable settings that are hard to expose via the OS 10 default system. For example, keyboards and trackpads get random identifiers, which you have to do a few calls to pull out. But we've been working really hard on making sure that we're automating just about everything that OS 10 will really let us. The one thing that has continually stood in our way, that we have no control over, unfortunately, is an API to integrate with the Mac App Store. We've looked really hard. We've even tried doing really questionable techniques like looking at how like the iTunes Store queues up downloads of applications and stuff like that, and we haven't been able to get the Mac App Store to behave. We've of course voiced these concerns to Apple, and we really would like an official API to integrate with the Mac App Store, but that's the one thing I don't think we'll ever be able to work around entirely.
Could you use AppleScript?
I've tried. There's no AppleScript for the Mac App Store to tell it to try to install an application.
You could like search for something, click on the link, click install.
It turns out that that actually doesn't work so well with the Mac App Store on account of the way it uses web views. Because it does something very similar to the iTunes Store. It's actually a really weird embedded web view that has like iframes and junk like that in it, like inside the native application. It's kind of messy, but I mean, that's how they roll out live updates without rolling out an OS update. I'd love to talk to you maybe like tomorrow night at the after party over beers or something like that. Yeah?
I guess more of a logistical question. Does each of your employees just have to have their own Apple ID?
Yeah, so they do. We found that generally most of them do anyway, but Apple allows you to register for an Apple ID without a credit card in the case of the developer program. It's entirely free for just the ability to install the command line tools and stuff like that. And I don't think you actually even have to sign up for, I guess you still have to, you don't have to sign up for the developer program specifically, but you do need to have an Apple ID to download from the Mac App Store. So yeah, it's an unfortunate requirement, but there's really no other solid way of getting an entire tool chain like that on OS X. For example, like the full Xcode ships with some very necessary headers for GUI applications. So for example, without the full Xcode installed, even if you have the command line tools, you can't compile MacVim because it uses certain Cocoa GUI headers. We haven't added a package provider for Mac ports, but it'd be really easy to do so. Right now, the one we use is Homebrew with, like I mentioned, our custom patches to allow binary by default distribution for all packages. But yeah, it'd be very easy to write a Mac ports provider and use Mac ports as a package source as well. I'd be happy to show you how to get started with that. That's really doable. Anyone else? Yeah?
You mentioned right at the very beginning that you're looking at using a customized version of 193.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what your customization's done, if you've considered pushing that back up to Ruby itself.
So it is actually an open source repository. If you go to github.com/github/ruby-the code shop, that is our fork of the code shop's fork of Ruby. So basically, if you've ever heard of the Falcon patches, the code shop is where Falcon fellow works, and that they've developed all those performance patches for Ruby 193. And our fork adds a few fixes and performance improvements on top of that. One of the biggest things we did is some things to support marshalling strings, encoded strings in the same format that 1.8 does. The big reason being is that we wanted to be able to quickly flip back and forth between 1.8 and 1.9 in production, and we have a ton of non-trivial objects in memcache. And you want to avoid getting all those flush out of memcache because they're invalid, so we had to apply some encoding fixes there, but they're activated at runtime only. You have to set some options at runtime. It's not enabled by default by compilation.
Well, one question?
One more question?
So what are your thoughts on Rails.app that Yehuda is building on Kickstarter? Because it's going to come up for something which is going to be...
Yeah. You know, for people working by themselves, we're working on like in a team of maybe 1 or 2 people or just by themselves, I think Rails.app might be easier for them to get started with, especially if they're a brand new developer and they've never like really worked on developing code before. You know, I will say that we've made it really hard to get started for a new person, but if you have any amount of development experience, or if someone in your company has already set up a box in for you, it's really simple to get started. You know, we've worked hard on this project over the last year. We kind of like where it's at. You know, we'll note that we've not asked for donations. We've open sourced the whole thing to everybody. We've been taking and working with contributions very rapidly in the past 5 days, as you saw earlier. You know, I wish Rails.app and Yehuda's project, they're all the best, and I hope they can make it even easier to develop Rails. But I'm really happy with what we've achieved. So, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.